Have you ever noticed how some people spend months deciding what phone case to buy, but somehow reach their 30s or 40s without ever getting a tattoo? Not because they hate tattoos, not because they're judging people who have them. They simply never do it. And the strange part is, many of them have imagined getting one. They've saved designs, they've admired other people's ink, they've even pictured exactly where it would go. But when the moment comes, they stop. If that sounds familiar, this might not be about tattoos at all. It might be about the way your mind tries to protect you from something much bigger.
Imagine you're walking past a tattoo studio. You slow down without realizing it. A small design catches your eye. Nothing dramatic, just a tiny symbol, maybe a mountain, a wave, a date that changed your life. For a moment, it feels right. You think, maybe today. Then another thought arrives. What if I regret it? What if I change? What if this version of me disappears? So you keep walking. Weeks later, you pass the same shop. The same conversation happens again. Eventually, years go by. People assume you simply aren't interested, but inside, you know the truth. You were interested. You just never felt completely certain. And for some personalities, certainty feels like a requirement before any permanent decision.
People often think tattoo decisions are about confidence, but they're often about something deeper, how your brain relates to permanence. Some people see permanence as comforting, others experience it as pressure. If you're someone who carefully thinks through every decision, a tattoo isn't just ink, it's a promise your future self has to keep. And that's where the anxiety begins, because overthinkers don't just imagine one future, they imagine 50. One version of you loves the tattoo forever, another regrets it, another grows into someone completely different, another wonders why they ever thought this symbol represented them. Your brain doesn't stop after one possibility, it keeps creating more. Not because you're negative, because your mind has learned that anticipating problems feels safer than facing surprises. Pause for a second. Think about the last decision you delayed. Was it really because you didn't know what you wanted, or because you wanted absolute certainty before acting?
Many people who never get tattoos share another quiet habit. They don't like being trapped by old versions of themselves. Life has taught them something. People change, interests change, friendships end, dreams evolve, beliefs shift. The person you were 5 years ago might already feel like someone else. So the idea of placing today's identity permanently onto tomorrow's body can feel strangely uncomfortable. Not because you lack identity, but because you're deeply aware that identity keeps moving. Some people celebrate permanence. Others protect flexibility. Neither is wrong. They're simply different ways of feeling safe.
There's another layer that people rarely talk about. Emotionally sensitive people often experience memories differently. A tattoo isn't just an image. It's connected to a feeling, a chapter, a relationship, a version of life. And emotionally sensitive people know something that others sometimes forget. Feelings can change dramatically over time. What once brought comfort can later bring sadness. What once felt meaningful can eventually feel distant. So instead of preserving a memory forever, they preserve the ability to reinterpret it, without something permanent reminding them every single day. To some people, that freedom matters more than the tattoo itself.
Now here's something interesting. People often describe those without tattoos as afraid of commitment, but that's not always true. In fact, many commit deeply to relationships, to careers, to family, to responsibilities. So why hesitate over something seemingly small? Because this isn't about commitment, it's about control. Some people find peace knowing they can change direction whenever life changes. The ability to reinvent themselves feels emotionally important. A tattoo can feel like closing a chapter, and some personalities never want the story to stop evolving. Think about childhood for a moment. Some people grew up in homes where making mistakes felt expensive.
Choosing the wrong thing meant criticism, embarrassment, or regret that lasted far longer than it should have. Over time, the brain quietly learns something. Permanent choices are dangerous. So adulthood becomes filled with careful calculations. You research everything, you compare endlessly, you wait for the perfect moment. Not because you're indecisive, because somewhere inside, you're still trying to avoid making the kind of mistake you once believed wasn't allowed. Pause again. When you imagine getting a tattoo, what scares you more, the tattoo itself, or the possibility that one day you'll become someone different?
Ironically, people who never get tattoos often appreciate art more than anyone realizes. They admire symbolism, stories, personal meaning. They can spend hours learning why someone chose a certain design. They're fascinated by identity. They simply express it differently. Instead of writing their story onto their skin, they write it into journals, music playlists, books they've underlined, photos they never delete, cities they visited, people they've loved, quiet rituals no one else notices. Their identity exists everywhere, just not necessarily on their body.
Here's the twist. Sometimes refusing permanence isn't fear. Sometimes it's acceptance. Acceptance that human beings aren't finished products. We're unfinished stories, constantly rewritten, constantly edited, constantly discovering parts of ourselves we didn't know existed. For these people, leaving their skin untouched isn't the absence of self-expression. It's its own form of self-expression. It quietly says, I don't need to freeze who I am today. I trust myself to keep becoming. That's a very different message from indecision.
Of course, none of this means everyone without tattoos shares the same psychology. Some simply don't like them. Some dislike needles. Some never think about tattoos at all. Human beings are far too complex to fit into one explanation. But if you've repeatedly imagined getting one, only to stop every time, it might be worth asking yourself a different question. Not, why don't I have a tattoo, but what does permanence mean to me? Because your answer might explain much more than your relationship with ink. It might explain why you stay in jobs too long, why you hesitate before speaking, why you overthink simple decisions, why you hold on to options even when your heart already knows the answer. Sometimes the smallest choices reveal the deepest patterns. Maybe you've spent years believing your hesitation meant weakness. Maybe you called yourself indecisive. Maybe other people joked that you think too much. But what if your mind wasn't trying to ruin your life? What if it was trying to protect the future version of you? The challenge is that protection can slowly become a prison. Life doesn't wait for certainty, neither does growth. Sometimes the most meaningful parts of your identity aren't the things you preserve forever. They're the moments you were willing to experience, even without guarantees. Whether you have tattoos or never plan to get one, the real question isn't what's on your skin. It's whether you're allowing yourself to become the person you're still growing into. Because in the end, the most permanent thing about you was never your body. It was always your ability to change.